Amazing. Thank you all so much. All of our judges, all of our team members, all of our community members who have come here to participate in the Cal State Fullerton Middle School, High School Invitational. We are so happy to have you and excited to host you and facilitate the competition that your students, that your children, and that your young people will be participating in on this weekend. For a lot of you, we recognize that you may do this, that you may have more experienced competitors in debate or individual events. And so this could be a buffer or a refresher for you. But for a lot of people, this is your first opportunity and you're just taking a weekend out to support the young people who you care about, who you're excited about, and who you want to see do well in speech and debate. So if that is you, we want to make sure that you have the information that you need to walk into these rounds, whether it be debate or individual events, with confidence, and to talk about the things that need to be talked about, to give the decisions that need to be given, and to give feedback to the students that they need to have to grow in this new thing, this new activity that they're passionate about. So our hope is to spend a couple minutes just to give you some solid background information about what you should know to make it through this weekend. Of course, we are available in various tab rooms through various links, including this one, to start to answer your questions and to direct you to the places that you need to get questions answered if you have ones that we can't answer here. But we want to stop here, or have you stop here first, just to be on track in terms of your judging commitments and responsibilities for the weekend. Before I turn it over to Carlos Palayo, who is going to help me round out this conversation, and even Jess Terrell, if she's here to add and contribute as some coaching, Cal State Fullerton speech and debate, to how we understand these things. Before I turn it over to them, I want to start with a quick tutorial about Tabroom. Tabroom is a website that will be our foundational platform for how we fill out and disseminate ballots. So we will watch an experience, but where do you put the information after that experience is over? How do you make sure that the proper school knows who won, who lost, how they've been ranked, and how many points they'll receive? I'll share that with you right now. I want to go over and share my screen and take you to the Tabroom website. This is the general platform even before you end up entering or signing into the tournament. Very quickly, you see that the Cal State Fullerton Invitational is not very far from the top. So if you need some quick information about the schedule, about information for the tournament, about the invite, you can look right here on the tabroom.com homepage and see our tournament 5 or 6 slots from the top. For your specific information and information you need to know about your responsibilities this weekend, you should have already created a Tabroom account. If you have not, you should connect with the school that you are representing to make sure you get those things created within the next hour or so that you can be plugged into the tournament. But in a world where you have an account already, you'll click the login button and you'll simply enter the email address and password associated with the account you created. Once you enter in to the Tabroom platform, you will see probably on that first page the rounds that you have been assigned. Now, these are rounds that I have at the Harvard Round Robin, which is not here, all the way over on the East Coast. But when I get ready to sit down and participate and judge these rounds, my rounds will be right here available for me at this platform. I can simply press start. It'll take me into the platform that'll show me things like the debaters or the individuals who are participating in the round. It'll give me a box or a place to put how many points they have earned. And depending on the event, it'll give me a way to rank the people who are participating in that particular activity. This is more specific for individual events. After I do this, and you've been giving or will be giving judging information about points and about rankings and things like that, you should indicate very specifically what school the individual represents or the team represents, very clearly represent which side you have selected. If it's a low point win, which means they sounded really good, and this is for debate specifically, they sounded really good, but they didn't really win the debate, that's the button you want to click. You sounded better than the other team, you sounded worse than the other team, but you won, right? A low point win means you got less speaker points, right? You got lower points, but you won the debate. So if it's a low point win, you want to make sure you click the button right here. Again, this is specifically for debate. If you have individual events, there will be other buttons and other things you can push to make sure your ballot is correctly represented. Before you click the submit ballot button, you want to go ahead and check out the box down here for feedback. Here you have a couple different options for feedback. If you are in debate, you get to give students feedback at the end of your round. Carlos will mention this later, but if you're in individual events, you do not disclose your decision. Instead, all of the information you have teams or for individuals who have participated, all individuals or certain individuals, you can click the tabs down here. And that'll enable you to get the right information to the people who need that feedback. If you are in debate, you can disclose your decision and tell people who you voted for and why at the end of the debate. But if you would like for them to have extra information, if you want to send some information to their coaches, if you want them to know anything by both teams or individual teams, you have the option to click those particular buttons. And then lastly, when all of your information is complete and has been inserted or input into your liking, you can go and click the submit ballot button, and that will send your ballot to the tab room. Once you do that, you should go ahead and come back to the judges room that we've set up for your particular event, whether it be parliamentary debate, whether it be whatever IE event, whether it be public forum. Come back to that particular tab room and wait for your next ballot to be assigned. So ultimately, this is how you navigate tabroom.com. When in doubt, this is the last thing I'll say before I turn it over to Carlos. When in doubt, click your name and your email address right there at the top, and it should get you closer to the information you're looking for about your responsibilities. If there's no information there, you have not been assigned a ballot. If there's no information there, you have not been assigned a ballot. So basically, you want to keep refreshing as the day goes through so that you have a good idea about what's going on. Robert, how can I answer your question?
Yes. With individual events, are say there are 7 participants, do you get 7 options to write feedback to them? Or is it just in that one plane and you write like comments that are going to go to all the coaches?
That's a good question. What I've indicated here, if we go back to the feedback box that I have, we see this is a debate example, but I imagine individual events is set up in a similar way, where this reason for decision box is the comments that go to everybody who participated in the exchange. Whereas I can click on these individual tabs, and when I judge Kentucky, I'll be able to send information to Kentucky, and I'll also be able to send information to Rutgers Newark based on their individual participation. So you have the option to send information to everybody as a collective, as well as the individual participants in your event.
So the individual students will be listed there. There'll be like 7 tabs then if 7 kids were in the round, or 6.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Thank you.
No problem. Brenda says, if we're having any problems, i.e. a participant doesn't show up or there are technical difficulties, who do we contact? We have decided that you should come back to the base tab room that you have been assigned from, where that ballot was assigned from, and you can communicate any concerns to the person running that tab room in that room. So you'll simply return back to that Zoom link and submit a message or alert that tab room and let them know what's going on. And then from there, they'll follow up. Rachel says, I see how to submit the answers, but how do we actually listen to the debate? When you submit your ballot, that is something that happens after the exchange. During the exchange, you should solely be focused on listening to the individuals speaking and taking notes or flowing that exchange. So a lot of what you insert here will be the things that the conclusions you come to after the debate. Don't try to fill this out while things are happening. Instead, go directly to tabroom.com at the end of the exchange. Oh, and where do you see the exchange? That's a good question. So when you click on Tab Room, as you can see, there are some Zoom links here. There are little rooms that have already been set up and established for you to go and watch the exchange. So you'll simply go here where you find your current rounds that you've been assigned, and then you'll see the Zoom button. You click that and all participants should be there waiting for you. If there are no other questions, first of all, if there are any other questions about Zoom Tab Room, you can go ahead and either unmute or drop your question in the chat. How long do we wait for them to show? Give the students that you're waiting for at least 15 minutes before you start to get worried and panic or go to any other room and alert us. They could be moving between events, activities, connectivity issues, and things like that. So from the time you get your ballot and have most participants available and ready to start, if you have 1 or 2 people missing, give them maximum 15 minutes and we'll go from there. We'll talk about video and the requirements there when we get a little bit further in our conversation. Let's see. I never received a confirmation code by email. When I set up my Tab Room account, I've confirmed my email, asked for confirmation to be resent. I don't see a schedule for myself. Bob, thank you for this question. What we should do is try to connect you to Max, who might be around. Well, first, are you judging individual debates or IEs?
Lincoln Douglas for middle school.
Okay, so Max, who's over Lincoln Douglas, or how will we get this person connected to
Hi,
their,
that's me. We can talk about that after this meeting.
perfect,
So
okay.
after this, so can I answer one question though? One of these questions that are, so all the questions that are asking like where do you go and who do you go to? If you have questions with a certain, in regards to a certain event, there is a tab room and there's it's a tab room and a judge room. It's all collectively put together, meaning that if you are in public forum, you as a judge should be hanging out in the public forum tab/judge room. And there's a link for that available on tab room, as well as the email that I just recently sent out that gave you notification for this meeting. So if you are having issues with a particular event or a particular debate, you would message the person that correlates with that tab room, right? So you would ask that question in that particular tab/judges room. The current rounds are not going to be posted until the pairings are posted. So there is a schedule that is listed on tab room and the invitation, and it tells you when a particular round will be sent out. So if you don't have anything right now, you probably shouldn't. So they will only be available to you once the rounds are actually posted.
As you look for and anticipate information about your judging responsibilities, a huge friend of yours will be the refresh button this weekend. Things are constantly happening. We're constantly getting rounds that end at staggered and differing times, and then people follow up and we're able to post new postings after that. So press and refresh to make sure nothing has changed on that ballot page is going to be the way that you know whether or not you have a responsibility at any particular time. There was also a question before I turn it over to Carlos about when you give judge commentary. You give judge commentary not after each individual speaker, but after the entire exchange. Carlos, go ahead and take it over, and we'll probably answer a lot of these other questions as we go along.
Sure. All right. Thanks for turning over. Hi. My name is Carlos. I'm a graduate teaching associate here at Cal State Fullerton, and I'm going to just be providing you with a little bit of guidance on how to otherwise judge debates by the basic parameters that we have 3 different styles, that being public forum, Lincoln Douglas, and parliamentary. I'll be going over a little bit of the general style of how to judge debate and a little bit more in detail as to what we specifically look for in the ballots. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and yeah, we'll get started. I'm super excited for this, so I hope y'all are too. By the way, I'll answer the question on feedback as we progress, because I do have a slide over here that does very much cover feedback in greater detail and the kind of feedback that we sort of have an expectation for when it comes to the students that we're judging. Because keep in mind, a lot of these students are very young, and a lot of the students, for many of them, I could definitely speak to personal detail on some of them. For a lot of them, it can very much be their first tournament. So it's an intimidating experience. You definitely want to make sure that this is a very welcoming experience, that yes, you are very straightforward when it comes to the feedback that you give, but you also want to be as welcoming as possible and making sure that you're fostering an environment in which the students will want to come back. They'll want to keep debating. It's a great environment. All right, first, hi, welcome. Honestly, I could not have led it better than Toya just did, but yeah, welcome to the middle school, high school debate tournament. Yay! So we'll be mostly discussing 3 basic areas when it comes to the debates that you'll be judging. Judges here will be judging a variety of 3 different styles, that being public forum, Lincoln Douglas, and parliamentary debates. Depending on where it is that you're put in the judges pool, you'll be debating, or you'll be judging one of these throughout the course of this weekend. So let's go into the first one. A couple of basic concepts to cover, though, are first, tabula rasa. Tabula rasa is this really old basic concept that says that all judges are supposed to be a blank slate. It's something that you're going to hear in every single debate tournament that you will ever go to, that you're expected to be a blank slate. The basic gist of it, without taking up too much time, is really just to say that your own biases, your own experiences, everything that you, for example, let's say you know a lot about voter or like compulsory voting. Great. Awesome. You're probably going to want to leave that at the door, because you don't want to let those biases that you've gathered from watching a whole lot of CNN or reading a whole lot of New York Times articles really influence your decision in the round. Within the round, you want to place the burden on the students to inform you about what it is that their arguments are essentially saying, and not let yourself be informed so much by your own previous experiences in the past. This is especially a little difficult for some of our more experienced debate judges as well, who maybe want to insert a whole lot of feedback. And my encouragement for you is put that feedback in the written feedback that you would otherwise have at the end of the round, or even afterwards once you're talking to the students. There's definitely going to want to be an excitement with explaining to students what uniqueness is, what links are, and everything else like that. Save that towards the end and talk to the students afterwards about it. Make it an educational experience otherwise. But yeah, for the sake of this tournament, we are very much expecting our judges to be tabula rasa, to be a blank slate. Again, please don't let your own personal biases determine the decisions that you make within a round. It's really important for the students as well that they have consistent judges within each round. That being said, there is such a thing as well as judge paradigms, and students have all been told that they should be reading judge paradigms before they go into every single round. To give you the 10-second version of it, a judge paradigm is essentially where you as a judge explain what your own preferences are for certain debates. This mostly applies for some of our more experienced debate judges as well, who have years in a business and very much may like to see a debate done a certain way. So you very may well put a greater emphasis on impacts as opposed to maybe solvency or something like that. In which case, then the students are usually expected to read your paradigm before they walk into the round, so they already have an expectation as to the kind of judge that you are, mostly. But yeah.
Carlos, I
Oh,
have a question.
yes.
How do I know that my judgment interfere my, the results? Like for example, people will say, this is the evidence that they provide, but the evidence itself is weak in my understanding because it's not authoritative. Does that count as my judgment?
That is definitely a really interesting point. Oh, Toya, you had something to say?
I mean, my biggest take is when it's all said and done, we're evaluating argument next to each other. So you don't want to do work for the other team. Assertions like arguments or evidence rather are weak, or that the assertions that it makes are not nearly as strong or warranted or complete, are observations that students should be learning how to identify for themselves. So you want to judge the debate in front of you, not any perceptions of the evidence, not any perceptions of the arguments. Right now, we're trying to teach students to use evidence. We are learning and adapting the ability to find high quality evidence and utilize it. But for right now, the goal is to evaluate how these individuals are comparing and explaining things side by side. So allow them to do that work, and you just evaluate the debate that's happening before you.
Based off of that as well, I would definitely say that if a student, say, doesn't really catch a dropped argument, it's not really so much on you to point that out and be like, oh no, dropped argument, that's going to be what I base my decision off of. Certainly you should call it out in your feedback, but don't base your decision off of that, because that's on the students to call out. It's on the students to question the validity of the evidence, to question why that argument matters in the whole context of the debate. So otherwise.
There was a question about speed in the chat. To address it really quickly, you can absolutely, before an exchange begins, ask debaters to slow down. Let them know either you prefer a slower debate or that you are not as experienced as some other coaches who like it quicker. So you can absolutely ask them at the beginning to slow down. They may even ask you before, just to be sure about what goes and what doesn't go in front of you, but you should clarify your expectations before the debate begins, and try not to do it in the middle of the debate unless it's just absolutely too fast. But even then, I would suggest that you wait until the end and say, we talked about and compromised. I told you that I would like speed a little bit slower because you went faster. I didn't catch a lot of your arguments, and that contributes to maybe why you lost the debate or did not get as many points as you would want. So you don't need to call it out at the beginning, but rather, since it's understood by all parties involved, something you can pinpoint and talk about at the end.
Yeah, something that we would normally have available during in-person debates is judges would normally be able to say clear in the middle of a round, but as you might be able to notice is that only one voice can speak at a time when we're in the confines of obviously a Zoom room. So when you say clear, it may very much crowd out some of the other voices that are speaking in the midst of a debate, and it's kind of counterconstructive as well, because you'll be missing more of that information if you call clear. Perhaps type clear in the chats, if anything, but similar to what Toya was saying as well, let that otherwise influence your speaker points towards the very end and point that out. Otherwise, speaking of which, great segues. So you always want to make sure that you have a consistent, steady flow sheet. This is normally what we call keeping notes in a round. Debaters and judges alike are expected to keep consistent notes throughout the entire round in a form of flowing a debate. I'm not going to lie when I say I have way too many flow sheets scattered around my desk, and based off of how long this weekend is going to be, it will probably be more. You want to make sure that you have flow sheets available. And when I say flow sheets, that just generally means reach into your cabinet, grab a piece of paper, grab a pen, grab 2 pens if you can, red for neg, AF in black or something like that. And otherwise, make sure you're keeping consistent, steady notes of the debaters and what they're saying. This allows you to be able to base your decision with a little bit more precision by the end of the round in identifying certain arguments that persuaded you as opposed to certain debaters that persuaded you. Because the key to debates is that you absolutely want to base your decision off of the arguments and how the arguments are functioning within the round, as opposed to whether or not the debaters are wearing really shiny shoes. Can't really tell because of Zoom calls, but obviously. So keep consistent, steady notes throughout the debates, because students are sometimes going to want to stay after the round and ask you a couple of questions as well. To know what the reason for decision, I'll be using this term throughout today's presentation, reason for decision, RFD, is based off of. Alrighty. To the point about emailing cases, actually, yes, let me go ahead and address that when we get to the Lincoln Douglas part, but it also depends on the type of debate that you're judging. On NSDA campus, it's a platform that we're using. I'll show us what that looks like when we eventually get to the platform itself, but the platform does allow you to be able to share cases within the platform. So for Public Forum and Lincoln Douglas, this doesn't apply to Parley, because in Parley, there's no prepared cases beforehand. But for Lincoln Douglas and Public Forum, debaters can absolutely, and sometimes they'll ask their opponents if they would like to share each other's cases, in which case they'll either start an email chain, but I would highly recommend using the drop-down feature on the platform itself to share each other's cases. But that's a really excellent question. And the other thing as well that I'll mention is you want to make sure you have constructive feedback and areas of improvement, right? A couple of general questions that I would highly recommend that you ask yourself by the end of the round are, obviously, which side won? You definitely want to make sure you have that. What were the major arguments that persuaded you within a round? Which arguments were most impactful? Brass tacks, at the end of the day, if you don't really know what to vote on, impacts are certainly your best bet. Or which arguments were not impactful, or better yet, dropped. And when I say dropped, it means that debaters didn't really have a response to set arguments. So the other side calls them out for not having a response to set arguments, because in debates, concessions usually means that the argument is accepted automatically by the other side. And I'll say it again for the people in the back, that if a debater does not talk about an argument, then that is a concession, and concessions are acceptance. So if a debater doesn't talk about an argument, technically speaking, they accept it. That makes your decision a whole lot easier. Any questions before we move on? These are really great questions, by the way. So, okay. I am not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because Toy did such an excellent job when it came to covering a lot of this, but I'll kind of just touch upon these real quick. So you definitely want to make sure that you have speaker points, choose which side.
Quick
Yeah.
question. What's the normal procedure for announcing the decision at the end of the debate? Is that recommended, not recommended? What's the rule?
Answer questions at the end of a debate. The most important thing is to make sure all parties are there, available, ready to hear what's about to be said. After you have everybody there, you want to be very clear about which side you have voted for. So after you have all parties available, okay, I have voted whatever direction in this debate. One sentence, very clear, very concise. Try to get it right? Make sure you don't say the other side, because that is just an embarrassing moment where it gets weird when you have to tell somebody who thought they won that they didn't win. After you make it clear who won or who lost the debate, you should then explain in a sentence, or a few phrases, not even a few phrases, but in a reasonably sufficiently detailed explanation why you voted the way you did. Ultimately, in this debate, I believe that the AF is more correct about this, that, and the other. I don't think the negative really had a lot of good arguments against it, and I don't think you had good questions in the cross-examination. Whatever logic you're using to base your opinion on, you want to give a clear reason for a decision. And then from there, it's up to you. You can give some general tips on how to improve when we move forward, or you can look at both teams and say, here's 1, 2, or 3 tips for you to improve for the next time. Here are a couple tips for you to improve next time. Slow down, make sure you answer questions with more confidence. Make sure that you remember to bring up your evidence toward the end of the debate, and then you can move on to the next experience. But get everybody's attention. Make sure you are clear and articulate about who won that exchange. Give a clear reason for your logic for who won or who lost. And then from there, you have the option of giving them advice to improve for later exchanges.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, my own personal preferred order is usually to go RFD, feedback, but again,
So
question.
I have one question.
Yeah.
That means when we do the judging, we just judging they win or lose based on the techniques they applied.
Yes, in the sense that they will win or lose depending on, and this kind of goes back to the whole like low speaker points score that was made earlier, that sometimes maybe the person's delivery will not be the best. Maybe the person will stumble a couple of times. They'll stutter more than a couple of times, but the argument that they presented maybe was not addressed by the other side. So in which case you would base your decision off of that alone.
Okay.
Mhm. So back to the ballots. Again, I would just say AF, neg, choose a winner, assign some speaker points. The important part though, and I definitely have to put way more of an emphasis on this, is please, 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 please. And yes, I realize that there's at least one pixel in the back. I would absolutely recommend, and actually very much put an expectation that we at least have more detailed reason for decisions, or at least feedback. Feedback is incredibly important to a lot of these students. And for a lot of the students, one of the most discouraging things is walking out of a round only to realize that there's no feedback or no explanation as to why a judge sided a certain way. It's a bit of a defeating experience because then it doesn't really allow coaches or debaters themselves to really learn from the experience. So I would highly recommend that we instead apply a little bit more precision when it comes to explaining why a debater might have won a certain round, or at least justifying the decision, explaining the decision in greater detail. Detail is greatly appreciated by these students. They work pretty hard to make these arguments for judges. So any questions on this?
There was a question about chats to judges in the chat. I definitely do not think that chatting judges during the actual exchange is a good idea. So you can remind debaters to not chat you throughout the exchange, or you can just ignore the chats as they come through, pretend they don't exist, pretend you never saw them, particularly if they're asking questions that, will help them do better or perform better as the debate develops or goes on. Just ignore them, act like they're not there, or make it clear ahead of time that you won't be paying attention or responding to any chats.
It's very much the model.
Tabroom.
I'm sorry.
So how can we reach the Tabroom?
You'll come back. So based on the event that you are participating in, Lincoln Douglas, public forum, parliamentary debate, there is a specific tab room that you are being sent out from and that you should return to once you.
There's a front page. The front page of the tournament has all the links now.
Thank you.
I just put it into another place so everybody
Perfect.
can find
Thank
it.
you.
Perfect. I'm about to teach a class real quick and slide out of this particular exchange, but Carlos and Jess are going to take it from here. You haven't heard from Jess a whole lot, but Carlos will tag her in and she will contribute some more context and explanation for things that we haven't quite covered up to this conversation. Jess, thanks so much for tagging in for me. Carlos, great job so far. Good luck to everybody judging this weekend. And again, thank you so much for the contributions that you're making to these students in their weekend. We really appreciate it. And I know they do too.
See you, Toya. Alrighty, just going to finish this up as well. RFD, really important. Another thing to mention is that the feedback that you give to the students will be very much the feedback right here on the small tabs that you might see next to RFD. The feedback goes to the students themselves, to the team. So that means that the other team can't see the feedback that you give to them. The reason for decision goes to both teams. I would just say be extra detailed when it comes to the RFD. If anything, at least if written feedback is a little bit light, then put a greater emphasis on the verbal feedback that you give at the end. Since we are single flighted, there might be a little bit of time towards the very end, but I would still not spend too much time on that written verbal feedback. Or I'm sorry, the verbal feedback as opposed to the written. Alrighty. I'll be moving on to the next slide as well. I'm going to be checking the chat kind of sporadically here and there, but yeah, I'll do my best to navigate this. Once you're assigned a round, then here's a couple of things to keep in mind. One, are all the students there? Please, 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 please don't start your ballot unless all the students are already there present within a round. And what that means is if you're on NSDA campus and all 4 debaters are there, you're judging public forum, 2v2. So all 5 participants are there between yourself, 2 debaters, fantastic. Start your ballots, please. Which means you're going to want to do both things of both pressing start on your ballot as well as entering the NSDA campus room, which I'll show us what that looks like in just a moment. Second, you want to make sure that you start the round. Sometimes people will forget to put start on the ballot and they won't necessarily start the ballots until maybe a little bit later, in which case then we would just send out a brief, gentle reminder that says, please, judges, remember to start your ballots before or during the round itself. And once you finish taking a couple of questions at the beginning, keep in mind, Students will also be at liberty to ask you a couple of questions at the beginning with regards to judge preferences. This goes back to the earlier thing that I was talking about, the paradigm. Sometimes paradigms won't exactly be too detailed and they won't add all the little nuance that like students might want as well. So students may very much want to ask you questions before the round begins. Take them, by all means. Answer them as honestly as you can. If you have a lot of experience when it comes to judging debates, then you already know what to do. But if this is your first time watching a debate, then just answer questions as to what honestly would persuade you. And at the end of the day, if you don't really know what to base your decision off of as well, impacts, again, I'm gonna say them again and again and again and again, impacts are super, super important to debates. And after the round, already mentioned verbal feedback as well. Jess, is there anything else that you think you would add as well when it comes to like questions that you should ask or feedback at the very end? Are we good?
Not really. I think you're good.
We're blasting through this. All right. Let's go into the actual specific formats. Like I said, 3 different formats. Oh, say it one more time.
響嗰個凳嘅旁邊，爸爸你唔好太死板啦。
Okay, thank you. First is public forum. Public forum is 2 teams of 2 are debating. The times are here. That being said, I do have the times written down at the very bottom. So I would absolutely, if you're judging public forum throughout this weekend, please write down the times. Teams are pretty self-sufficient, which means they'll be timing themselves. They are pretty good at running the debate mostly by themselves and timing themselves, making sure that they're facilitating crossfire, and they'll be running their prep time as well. A quick note about prep time is that teams can call upon prep time and ask to use it whenever. That's totally normal. They'll say, I'm taking a little bit of prep time. You as a judge, you should always, as a habit, also have your own timer on you. I always make sure that I have my timer, my phone next to me, and that at all times I'm judging the debaters. Not that I don't trust them, but sometimes in novice debates, they very much will, well, they might forget their times, or they might go a little over time. That's when you as a judge, for example, if you notice one team is taking about 3.5 minutes of prep time, you want to remind them that they have finished their prep time. That's one of those rare circumstances in which judge intervention is very much necessary. If you notice that one team is taking too much prep time and the other one is not, if they're going over time, essentially. The times are also reflecting the times that we added just recently onto the invitation. So it's not going to be 2-minute speeches for the first speaker summary. It's going to be 3-minute speeches. Okay. And Rachel, to your question, you're not really assigned randomly to a type of debate. It depends on where your judge pool is. So I believe it says so on your tab room as well on the front page, what debate you're judging. So you're placed in a certain judge pool for public forum, Lincoln Douglas, parliamentary debates, and you'll only be judging those rounds for the weekend. Yeah.
Carlos, I just wanted to add in that it's very important that judges also keep track of time, even if teams are self-sufficient, because sometimes, you know, they might be lollygagging and like taking up time trying to send an email. You need to remind them to be using their time effectively, because we are running on a schedule and we don't want to run behind.
Yeah. Also, just, I mean, I've seen it happen as well. Everyone has seen these horror stories happen when you have someone that's going 5 minutes, 6 minutes, and they don't know when to stop. What you would want to do as a judge is, there's 2 ways you can handle this. You can either let them continue, but not flow down what they're saying and put a hard stop to what they're saying. And this is what I personally like to do. I just stop recording all of the arguments from the moment they pass their time. I don't really intervene. I let them finish and I just stop recording all the arguments. And when the other team asks, where did you stop? I say, here's where I stopped recording all the arguments. Everything after, honestly, nullified. I don't take it under consideration. But I will be striking off a couple of speaker points for going so over time. The other way is you let them go for about 10, 15 seconds, and then you say, oh, that is your prep time. That is up. Thank you very much. You may very much see this within the novice rounds as they're still struggling to kind of gain a familiarity within the times, like the times themselves. Also keep in mind that the resolution is going to be here below. The USFG should enact the Medicare for All Act of 2019. So just keep in mind, this will be the resolution they'll be debating every single round. All right, so pretty good. Teams usually run contentions here. So you're not going to see, hopefully not plans, please. Please no disadvantages, please no topicality. You're probably going to see contentions. Contentions are essentially just arguments themselves. Argument number 1 as to why Medicare for all is good. Argument number 2, argument number 3. And before the round begins, debaters usually present a framing mechanism that says how you'll be evaluating the round. Okay, Lincoln Douglas. We got 2 more to cover. So LD and Parley. Lincoln Douglas, the times are as follows: 6-3, 7-3, 4-6-3, and that's it. It is 1 versus 1 debate, so 1 debater against 1 debater. The evidentiary standards are a little bit different for LD than most other kinds of debates, in that you'll notice that a lot more debaters are placing a greater emphasis on the quality and the quantity of evidence that they provide in rounds. They'll usually be reading cards, which is essentially just a fancy way of saying arguments paired up with evidence themselves. So they'll usually be reading a lot of examples and a lot of evidence within each round. And the topic is, in a democracy, voting ought to be compulsory. So no one should be reading anything different than that. Here's your times summarized as well: 6-3, 7-3, 4-6-3, and 4 minutes of running prep. A little bit more than public forum, so just keep that in mind. And as a reminder, debaters should be timing themselves, and you should be timing them as well. Right? Just make sure that your times align. A little note that I'll add as well when it comes to Lincoln Douglas is that we're not going to be abiding by CSUF rules for LD, which means that we're not going to have the distinctions between California LD and TOC LD. Essentially, yes, your students may run what they call the progressive arguments. Go ahead, run the dissat. That being said, not all judges will very much be prepared to watch said progressive arguments, which means that it's not really so much of a burden on you to immediately learn what a dissat is in the small confines of, say, the next 5 minutes. The burden is on the debaters to explain their arguments and to otherwise translate their arguments very much to your own preference. This basically means that the debaters are very much taking a risk when they're running said progressive arguments that may be very, very convoluted. And that risk you have to keep in mind, because it shouldn't really, when you're thinking about it, you shouldn't immediately think like, I don't understand the arguments, but it must be a good argument because I don't understand it. But rather, the debater is not doing a good enough job to really explain this argument to me. Keep that in mind when you're hearing arguments that sound very convoluted, right? Oh, pairings have been sent, so I would highly recommend checking them out while we wrap it up. Moving on. Oh, I mentioned this already. Arguments will look like this. If they're running progressive arguments, then it may be plans and advantages, counterplans and disadvantages. If you're not an experienced debater, then a lot of these terms may very much well be like within the void of possibility. But they typically run contentions, which is the same as public forum as well. And I would definitely keep an eye out for impacts or an explanation as to why the debate matters. Basically, if the debater is not telling you why the argument matters or why this certain impact matters, then honestly, they're not doing that great of a job to really contextualize why they should win a debate. And then finally, we get to parliamentary debates. Let me go ahead and quickly check chat as well. Cool. Parliamentary debates is a bit different from the other two. Now, the other two do have a certain set constant resolution that will be decided on every 2 months. With parliamentary debates, debaters will be debating a new topic every single round. If there's 6 rounds, they'll be debating 6 topics. If there are 6 rounds with 3 out rounds, then they'll be debating 9 topics in total. Math. I still remember math. So topics are chosen every single round, and they're chosen from a possibility of 4 different types of topics: fact, value, metaphor, and policy. Don't really let the distinction, I guess, carry as depending on the type of resolution that students will get, that will be the type of arguments that they very much push out. That being said, again, the burden is very much on the debaters to explain why it is that we have a policy resolution, why it is that we have a value resolution, and what kind of arguments go with that. A lot of the debaters are pretty familiar with those. Times: 7 for the first 4 speeches, 5 for the last 2. The only prep time that students have is 20 minutes before the round begins. Students are preparing in a variety of fact, value, metaphor, and policy, which means they'll be, again, they just learned about it on the spot in 20 minutes. My encouragement, and I'm hoping everyone's tuned in for this, is to debate styles. Parliamentary debates does not put so much of an emphasis on evidence. only the evidence that students can gather within the 20 minutes of their prep. They will not have cards. They will, oh, sorry. What part did I cut out on?
I'm not quite sure, but you cut off a little earlier with Parley.
Oh, sorry about
You
that.
you cut off right about when you said 20
let me-
minutes of prep.
Yeah. Okay. Basically, students have 20 minutes of prep, and what they prepare within those 20 minutes is the only thing that they're allowed to take with them into the round. If they find sources by CNN, Washington Post, New York Times, etc., that's all they have. And that's the evidence. They don't have months or weeks to prepare cards or pieces of evidence well beforehand to take with them into the round. Okay. So I would definitely say be a little bit more lenient when it comes to evidentiary standards, because there's no way they can possibly put together cards at that time. Okay. And topics are going to be announced as well in the Mass Parley Prep Room. Same thing as well before. They can run a variety of plans, advantages, counterplans, disadvantages, depending on the resolution they get. Policy topics, which they should explain to you at the very, very, very beginning. This is a policy resolution. We'll have plans and advantages, counterplans and disadvantages to them. Debaters should explain to you what all that means. Value, fact, and metaphor resolutions have contentions. One thing I'll mention, judge intervention looks a little different here. Debaters are allowed to call point of order in the last two speeches. Point of order means all timers stop. You as a judge immediately press stop on your timer and ask the debater, what are you point of ordering? And that's usually used to call out another team if the other team is bringing up new evidence or new arguments in the last two speeches that debaters cannot possibly and reasonably respond to, right? Because you cannot bring up new arguments within the last two speeches. So debaters will call point of order. You as the judge are responsible for stopping your time. All debaters stop their time, and you all figure out the point of order. The procedure is usually judge asks the person who called the point of order, what is this point of order on? They explain what the point of order is on. Then you as a judge would ask the opposing team to respond to that. And then you have three responses. One, point well taken, which means you acknowledge that there's a new argument that was brought in, strike it from your flow. Two, point not well taken, in which case, maybe they weren't listening, in which case, just move on from the debates. Number three, if you're absolutely boggled with time, just say, I'll take it under consideration. That's your way of basically saying, let's move on with the debate. Yeah. Points of information are brought in the first four speeches, with protected time being in the first and the last minute of each speech. Protected time means no points of order. No points of order in the first and the last minutes of the first four speeches. No points of, points of information. No points of information in the first and last minutes of the first four speeches. No POIs in the last two speeches, period. These are used to clarify information or to strategically ask your opponents info. There's no cross-examination in parliamentary debates. Points of information are essentially their form of cross-examining the other team. So if they call point of information, that's normal. Let them do that. Don't stop time for these though, okay? Please do not stop time for points of information. They keep going with the debates. You should also determine like what the procedure is for debaters to normally call a point of information. Typically speaking, I recommend that my debaters as well bring up the point of information in the chat. So if the debaters are looking at the chat, then they should see there's a point of information here. Otherwise, if they really don't see, then honestly, verbalize it. And the last thing I'll mention on debate as well is that there's a difference between constructive speeches, which usually describes the first 2 to 4 speeches of every single debate, and rebuttals, which are the last 2. The main gist to take away from this is that debaters don't bring up new arguments or a whole lot of new information really in the last 2 speeches. No new analysis, no new evidence, because the next time that debaters will be able to respond to that will be, I don't know, never. Instead, they're responsible for summarizing existing arguments, extending evidence, but most importantly, presenting you, the judge, with the reason why they should win. These are called voters. And constructive speeches, pretty normal as well. Just present arguments. Last thing I'll go ahead and mention is that the NSDA platform looks like this. You go into a competition room. This one's a test. So and you're going to have a variety of different tools available. There's a lot of people testing out this platform right now. So this is not what it's going to look like. There are way too many tiles. At most, you'll probably have about 4 tiles there if you were judging something like public forum or parliamentary debates. If you're judging Lincoln Douglas, then there should only be 2 other tiles there, yourself included, 3 tiles. A couple of buttons. If you're doing a POI, use the chat feature as well. That's the last thing I'll mention on that. It's a pretty user-friendly platform for the most part, but if you need any help, please, by all means, go ahead and reach out to us and we'll help you out. Otherwise, that's it for me. If you have any more debate questions, please go ahead and just circumvent them on over to me. I'm available always. I'm going to be living at this desk for the duration of my entire life. So, all right. Thanks, y'all.
So I missed basically the whole thing. I'm kind of confused on where shall we access the link and how do we find the competition rooms and stuff?
So the links are going to be sent via email, but that'll also be available.
Okay.
Yeah, so they'll be available on your Tabroom homepage as well. When you go to Tabroom, if you click on the username at the very top, then it should take you to a page that shows you if you're judging. Oh, hang on a sec. We do hear you. Sorry.
Yeah. Because I didn't see any links on my homepage. That's why I'm confused.
Yeah, for sure. It should be sent by the time that I do have someone else that's not muted. Yes, we can hear you. Who's not muted right now?
I'm not, Carlos. This is Naz. I have a question as well.
Yes. Question?
I missed the first 6 slides. Did you reference speaker points during that time?
Real fast. Max, can you hear me? Can you see
yeah. Hello?
Can you see who's unmuted right now? Yeah, so for the first 6 slides, I would highly recommend watching the recording as well because that will be sent out later on. But did he have a specific question on any one of the debate styles? Otherwise, we do
This would be for PF. Are there speaker points assigned?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you offer a range? Like an average speaker point would be like a 27.5, or someone really good would be a 29. Is that sort of the methodology I'm supposed to follow?
Yeah, so with speaker points, and this kind of goes generally across some other styles as well, 29 to 30 is very honestly idealistic as well, in the sense that the debater has to otherwise convince you wholeheartedly that the issue is 100% in issue and you should absolutely go out and compulsory vote or something. Like the person should absolutely be above and beyond if they're scoring between a 29 and a 30. Average scores definitely are usually between a 27 to high 28s or so. My own recommendation would definitely be don't be punitive if there's not really so much of a need to be punitive, right? You want to make sure that debaters are continuously coming back as well and participating. So that means, sure, if the debater drops something, then that probably won't reflect very well on their speaker scores, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they deserve, say, a 26.5. Unless it just said something absolutely foul and round. So 27 to high 28s are very much my recommendation. Half points are allowed.
Okay. And one more question. Am I allowed to request their cards if I don't follow or agree with data that they're presenting?
Yeah, if you think that something is just really off about the cards, if they very much read a statistic that says that 99.9% of all people vote today, then that just it's a weird statistic. It's really fishy. Honestly, I would question that too. So call the card.
Call the card. Okay, thank you.
Otherwise, I do want to go ahead and turn this over to Colette. Are you going to be tackling IEs next?
Yeah, I'll start it out and then Andrea's going to present.
All right. Thank you.
Yay! All right, so we've had lots of great questions and we've had lots of great presentations so far. In terms of individual events, I want to start out, in terms of a general thing that I forgot to mention when Toya was mentioning about opening up a Tabroom account as a judge, just make sure that if you're not sure if you have a Tabroom account, don't just automatically open one because your head coach, if you are not the head coach, may have already opened you a Tabroom account. And if you end up opening your own, you may end up with 2 Tabroom accounts, and then you may end up, the system will get really confused. And it will assume that you are 2 human beings when in reality you are just 1. So just, make sure that you check with head coach to see if you already have one and they already opened it, and then they can give you the information. You know, just check on that, because we don't want you to be two people trying to judge two things at once. That seems excessive. All right. So in individual events, I want to refer back to Toya's presentation at the beginning of this video that, like we said, is being recorded and will be available later for you to watch. In terms of how to look at what the ballot's going to look like, it's very, very similar in individual events. And like we talked about, there are individual places for individual comments for each of the individual speakers, so that you should be putting comments in each of those individual slots, so that those comments go back to the student and the coaches afterward. In individual events, I want to mention that the speaker points are different. They are 1 to 25, and 25 is best. In addition, there is no verbal disclosure. There is no information. You don't give them any information about how they did, how they ranked, or how they rated. That information is saved until after awards. Then they get all the ballots and the information in individual events. It's not like in debate where they find out whether or not they won or lost as the rounds go on. But in individual events, they just keep presenting, and if they make it to finals, they find out. If there is not a final round, then they'll have a third round. But that's something that we'll be sending out information for later on. I want to introduce, oh, my name is Colette Bloomer. Hi, everyone. It's not like I slept last night or anything. So I run the individual events team here at Cal State Fullerton, and we have a great time on our individual events team, even in a virtual world. Woo! Please enjoy my little stuffed friends behind me. And I want to introduce one of my graduate assistants, who is one of our coaches here, and Andrea Ruiz is going to be giving the presentation for individual events. Go, Andrea.
Hey y'all, I'm so excited to be here and be giving you this judges training that is so crucial throughout the rest of the weekend, where we get to enjoy these students for the first time and for the first few times competing. And it's very exciting. It's a very interesting experience, especially to see the type of topics and ideas they bring to the table. So I'm so excited to share with you a presentation that I have prepared. Hopefully by sharing, it makes seeing things a little bit easier. And of course, any questions that you may have, please feel free to include them in the chat box. I will try my best to be seeing the chat. If I do not manage to see it, I am more than happy to answer your questions at the end of the presentation. So welcome to our middle school, high school tournament for fall 2020. You know, I want to say thank you once again for being here. We're going to really appreciate your help and participation throughout all of this, in terms of being judges or just getting to, you know, cheer on the students if you're their coaches or if you're part of their schools. We have hosted this tournament for many years, and we hope the best. Even with our new tournament style of virtual competition, we hope that it's just as engaging and exciting, where where students want to return and continue doing this moving forward throughout their academic career. And then, of course, I just want to reiterate, we will be hosting this tournament for the next 3 days, starting today till Sunday, October the 18th. So just to start us off really quick, I just wanted to go over some guidelines, especially since this is very different than what we're accustomed to, but we're going to make the best experience possible for everybody here, our judges, our coaches, our tournament directors, and especially our students. So I definitely want to advise, I know this was something that was asked earlier, but I definitely want to advise that for IEs, especially as judges, you want to keep your camera on during the competition and have your audio off once the round starts and there is a presenter. For individual events, it's crucial that you have that interaction with them, because for many of them, it's their first time competing, and it's just very nice to have them know that there's someone there with them, as if we were doing an in-person tournament. So please keep your camera on. Ask your participants or the rest of the audience members that are there who are also competing if they can keep their camera on and have their audios off. If for whatever reason they cannot keep their camera on because they have to use the restroom, or they know that there may be a lot of distraction in the background, that is completely understandable. We are all here adapting to this new environment. It's just nice to have like that participatory audienceship there with you. Make sure to keep your phones on silent during the round. I know a lot of us throughout this weekend will have a lot of tech devices around us, and sometimes, you know, we may forget to turn off our audio. So just please put your phone on vibrate or on silent. So in case you accidentally forget to turn off your audio during someone's presentation, that doesn't go off and create a distraction for them. I'm so sorry about that. And this is something that Carlos mentioned as well as Toya. Try not to judge the students based on their background, camera quality, Wi-Fi quality, or whether they stand or sit during their presentation. A lot of students are very limited in the terms of space they were able to pick out during these competitions. So if they're presenting in their kitchen or in their room or even in the garage, it's important that we don't let their background play into our decision, especially with camera quality. There's different circumstances for every student, and as well as their Wi-Fi quality. Of course, with Wi-Fi, it's going to be one of our biggest challenges to see how connection works throughout the day. I do have some things about that, so please, in regards to connection, if one of your students somehow disconnects, we will have some information that I will provide towards kind of the ending of this presentation. You know, make sure that if you do have any questions or any concerns whatsoever, to check your text messages, check your email and Tabroom every 15 to 20 minutes. And if you are realizing that you're close to a round, you can even check your ballot or check the Tabroom to see if you have gotten a ballot for the upcoming round. Please do not worry if you don't see everything immediately. Sometimes these rounds can go over time, and that is completely normal. We're going to try our best to run things within schedule. So I just wanted to advise that. And then constant communication is just going to be critical if you have questions throughout. So I'm just going to check the chat really quick to see if anyone has asked any questions, excuse me. Okay, nothing yet so far. So I'm going to keep going. Thank you all for your patience. So what individual events entails to, and what we will be hosting this weekend is we'll be hosting 3 different types of platforms. We will be hosting limited preparation, which includes impromptu and extemporaneous. Our regular platforms that a lot of people are familiar with are informative and persuasive. And then our oral interpretation platform includes dramatic interp, humorous interp, thematic or oratorical interp, original prose and poetry, and duo. So just to start us off really quickly, I'm going to go into our limited preparation events. So the first one being impromptu. This is a 7-minute event. You, as the judges, will receive a set of quotations in the instructions of your ballots to give to each speaker. Each speaker will be given a different set of quotations. So say, for instance, speaker 1 is going, and speaker 1, let's just say hypothetically, their name is Anna. Then you will click on your ballot and look for Anna, and then you should see their quotations on there for you to give to them. You may give it to them as a private message or in the chat box if there is no option for a private message. You may want to consider that since you are having to give 3 quotations, you may want to give it one at a time so they have enough time to read it before you start the actual timer, especially since it's just a different format where they don't have the tangible paper with the quotations on there. And then, of course, within this type of platform, generally students prepare a speech within 2 minutes and deliver it within 5 minutes, totaling to the 7-minute event of a limited preparation. If students choose to go over the general structure of a 2-minute preparation, that's fine. During those 2 minutes, you will be giving verbal time signals for every 30 seconds. I advise you to please tell these students to also keep a timer on hand for this type of speech, since unfortunately we will not be giving time signals as we have in the past, just because it's a little hard to see your hand, or if you have like a virtual background behind you, your hand can possibly blend in there, and then it's like a floating arm just hanging around there. So you want to make sure before the event starts, you can tell your participant, please have your phone and timer ready. We will synchronously try to time together, just so you know kind of what time you're at, and so the judge also has that time. So say for instance, you start the timer and they're starting to prepare their speech. They've read through the quotations that you've provided for them. Once you start the timer, you would say your 30 seconds used, 1 minute used, 1 minute 30, and so forth until they are ready to present. Once they are ready to present, you're going to want to turn off your audio and let them present. At that moment, they should have already known, and you should have already disclosed to them that there will be no time signals, which is why you're allowing them to use their device or their phone to time themselves. And this kind of is the same structure for extemporaneous or extemp. So I'm going to move on to our next limited preparation platform.
Oh, before you start, can I just interject something?
Yes.
Okay, so when you mentioned give the quotations one at a time, you absolutely give the quotations one at a time. Because you want to, the way that the quotations, I think this will answer the question in the chat. The way that the quotations are set up, because I put them, I formatted them. You'll get a sheet in your ballot that will, and it'll be in the ballot instructions, and it'll have all of the quotations on there, and it'll say speaker 1, these 3 quotations, speaker 2, these 3 quotations. So when you are ready for speaker 1, you take those 3 quotations, you cut and paste them into the chat box. But you don't give speaker 2 their quotations, because you don't want to give the other speakers the quotations at the same time, because then speaker 6 or 7 is going to get way too much prep time. So then you let speaker 1 present. And then when you're ready for speaker 2, then you cut and paste speaker 2's quotations into the chat box, give them a few seconds to look at them, and then go, all right, I'm starting time. And so make sure that you're giving them out one at a time. That's all.
Thank you, Colette, for specifying that. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so definitely you'll get the hang of it as you're going. It's very exciting to see this type of platform, especially since they come up with things on the spot and they use different types of ideas or main points to deliver a speech on revolving a quotation. So it's really exciting. Based on our next limited preparation, it's extemporaneous, or also extemp. This is also a 7-minute speech. However, the only difference for this one is you do not give verbal or hand signals at all either, but you are more than welcome to tell the participant or the student that they can time themselves, because originally in an in-person format, we do give time signals. So these 2 types of platforms are the only exceptions where they can use their device to time themselves. The rest of the platforms that I will be presenting on, they cannot use their devices. That all had to come with preparation and time to practice where they're landing. So for this one, usually the students will go to what is called an extemp prep room, and they will be given every 7 minutes, every speaker every 7 minutes, they will be given 3 questions that are based on current events, and they have to choose one of those questions and prepare for 30 minutes. Once they're done preparing, then they would come to your room and present. For this type of platform, I do want to assure you that when you're in your room, do not freak out if you just see one presenter. That is very normal. That means that someone within 7 minutes, the next speaker should be coming in, since they're spaced out within 7-minute intervals for presentation. So you'll see one there, and then eventually the next one will appear, and so forth. And then Students should use about 7 or more sources to argue for their current event. They should either disagree or agree with the question they were provided with, and then have main points of analysis to support why is it that they agree or disagree with the question they have selected. This one's also very exciting, especially since they have 30 minutes to prepare on something that's very critical, going on regionally, internationally, or just within the United States. So same concept, just a little bit different. Colette, would you like to add anything else onto extemp?
Oh, just that there's no rule about there being 7 sources.
Okay.
I mean, it's a good guideline if you want to think about it. It's probably a good guideline for the collegiate level. It's just, you know, just don't think like if there aren't 7, oh no, I have to do something. But you know, if they have an adequate number of sources, it's going to be a better speech. So excellent job. Thank you.
So moving on to our next platform, which is informative or persuasive speeches, and any speech moving forward after this slide. All of these speeches are an 8-minute, 10 maximum speech. So for informative and persuasive, they cannot time this up. They cannot time themselves, excuse me. This is only judge based. Only the judges are allowed to time. There is no verbal or hand gesture time signals at all. And then of course, a very simple structure to follow for informative is you want context, pros and cons. It's kind of like a devil's advocate kind of platform where they're informing you about something. And then a persuasive is always based around problem, cause, and solution. And their solution should be like a call to action. Like, what is it that they're doing to really persuade you? Kind of like a car salesman, you know, what is it that they're doing to get you that car? And so for this one, you want to have they want to have a good amount of sources spaced throughout their speech to make it credible, to make it seem like they're engaging you on something you possibly do not know about. Definitely something that was mentioned earlier. You don't want to let your bias play into your judging decision. A lot of this has to do with them being able to present to you these concepts to the best of their capability. And, you know, just have fun with it. It's very interesting to see the different topics these students select to present on. And it's always something exciting to see, especially when it's their first time around, and we want to make it an encouraging experience where they want to continue with forensics throughout their career. Colette, did you want to add anything, or is there any questions so far?
I know that at the collegiate level, it's the persuasive speech is always a problem, cause, solution speech. But at the middle school, high school level, sometimes you'll see that they won't necessarily be problem, cause, solution speeches. So it could either be trying to change your mind about something, or it could be trying to take action about something. So you might just hear a persuasive speech that's just, you know, I want to change your perspective on this issue. So they're trying to change your mind about something, but they're not necessarily going problem, cause, solution, call to action, here's this policy I want changed. So it might be something, it's a little bit broader. So you might hear either of those things in a persuasive.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to our last form of platform, which is our oral interpretive platform, which includes dramatic, humorous, thematic, thematic, oratorical, original prose and poetry, and duo. So just to give some small context into what each of these contain. Dramatic interp is a scene typically from a play or a script. So they would have had to gone through a play or script and pick out a certain section where they think they would best interpret that dramatically. Each of these platforms, I want to assure you, they have an introduction to introduce the topic and how that correlates. And then you have your humorous interpretation, which is designed to be funny. These ones are very interesting to see as well. Thematic interp is a smaller piece of various sources, all presented to fit under one theme. Oratorical interp is a previously delivered public speech that the student interprets. Original prose and poetry, these pieces are written by students themselves. And duo, that means you have 2 students performing a scene at once together. Due to the nature that we're in, because of this virtual setting, For duo, there is some pandemic kind of guidelines or restrictions, as you can say. They cannot compete in the same physical space. So they do have to be in separate rooms trying to coincide their pieces at the same time if they're doing duo. They must use separate cameras. And this is a disqualifiable rule because of the pandemic, especially since there may be teams, duo teams where they don't have that fortune to be in the same space or setting to compete together at once. So for these types of platforms, it's the same setup. It's 8 minutes minimum, 10 minutes maximum. The students cannot tell themselves. This is meant to present a message by interpreting literature, a script, or a play, or a poetry. It's kind of like acting, but it's still very heavy, much literature-based. Have fun watching these, especially as judges. It's interesting to see how the students use their nonverbal skills to present something that can be very dark, gruesome, or humorous and exciting, and just at a whole different scale, and how they tie that into something that may be currently going on or something that is currently being studied. Colette, did you want to add something more to this section?
No, that's wonderful. I like the messages that they send, because there's always that introduction that they write, like you mentioned, and it's always right after the teaser, and they tell you what their message is. Like, this is the piece, this is what the message that I want to send with it, and then they present the rest of it, and it's really impressive the kinds of things that they want to talk about with these pieces. Go ahead.
Thank you. No, yeah, it's very fun. You know, usually they, like how Colette was mentioning, excuse me, they start off with like a teaser kind of to get you hooked onto what they're going to essentially be interpreting. And then they have an introduction to break down why they chose that piece and how this ties in to something grander. And then they go on to interpreting the rest of the piece, which is very beautifully done. So just really quick, I wanted to offer some judging tips, especially since these are kind of different types of platforms that follow different structures. So you want to make sure that as soon as you're giving your ballot that you press start, even though the round may start within 15 minutes, it's just to assure yourself not to worry about it later, in all honesty. And that way we don't have someone going into your room to check to see what is going on, if there's any form of technical difficulty. Once you do press start and once you are in your room, you want to check who's in your room. Usually, I like to do roll call even before we actually get started. I'll let the students know I'm just going to take a quick roll call to see who's here and to also see who's doubled entered. So the meaning of doubled entered means that sometimes students will be presenting two types of platforms at the same time. So let's just say, for instance, they have an oral interp and an informative, and they happen to be within the same time hour of a presentation. That's when you ask them, are you double entered by any chance? And if they say yes, you kind of want to ask them, where do you need to present first? So that way they can finish there first and then come to your room, or vice versa. Usually there's a structure of up to like 5 or 6 students presenting. And if anybody's doubled enter and say your first speaker isn't there, just go ahead and go on to your second speaker, and so forth. If the first speaker does come back after they've presented on their other round, or if by any chance they had any internet connectivity issues, they should have about 45 minutes to show up to their round if they are double entered, or if they're having any internet issues. They want to communicate that right away to their head coach or to their school, so that way they can communicate that to us. So yeah, you usually want to go in the order that you're given with your students. If somebody's not there, just go on to your next speaker, just to keep that flow of things going. Do not delay the round. You know, like I just mentioned, you want to keep going, keep pushing through. Make sure that that you time your student and that timing is on the ballot. I know that these ballots offer times in case you forget to click it. That's why I always have my phone on hand just in case, so I can time them from my phone, because I know sometimes we're already having to do a split screen, seeing the presentation, trying to judge, and that can become a little bit overwhelming. So I want to assure you that in case you don't feel like using the time option within the Tabroom judge ballot structure, you're more than welcome to use your phone as your timing device. And also, please provide the student with as much positive and constructive feedback. I cannot stress enough that for a lot of these students, it may be their first time or it may be their 10th time, but they're very eager to continue in forensics. So please provide like a very positive and constructive feedback. If they did something super well, just let them know you did super well because, and provide a little bit like of a 1 or 2 sentence structure. And then give them feedback as to what you thought maybe they could have added to their speech to make it even stronger than what it was already was, or anything that you feel like, hey, that was super great, but I think if you added this one thing there, it would have just like broken the roof and you would have done even better than what you were already doing. So definitely that type of feedback is great for them. And then I just saw really quick in the chat, Robert, you had a question?
Yeah, you know how you have the tabs for the individual students during IEs to write the feedback. Say speaker number 1 is going and you've written some feedback there, and then you're going to go to the second. Can you come back to that at the end, like at the end of the round where you've seen everybody and you want to add something? Can you go back to those individual tabs and add a little bit more, or is it like once you have closed that tab to start another student, do you lose that ability to go back?
Gotcha. Yes. That's such a great question to ask. Colette, did you want to answer it, or?
That's actually, I think it's in the next slide. You can even submit your ballot and then go back and add comments later.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yes, I do want to assure you, I believe Tabroom has the ability to automatically save what you're putting. Like say, for instance, you weren't fully done with speaker 1 on giving them feedback. I believe in the comment section where Toya had shown in the beginning for feedback, which will look just slightly a little bit different than debate. Those notes that you make automatically save. And so anything you wish to add further to that, you would just go underneath your last thought or comment and then keep going from there. And then I always have like a quick suggestion before you start ranking. I would say hear everybody first and then go ahead and start ranking and giving points, just because you never know if like the 5th speaker that's going for that round may be, the speech you felt most powerful or most credible. So you want to make sure to hear everybody out fairly, make sure to provide the rankings at the end. And then like Colette had mentioned from the beginning, for IEs, we do 25-1, 25 being like the best score and 1 being the lowest score. And then we have rankings from 1 to 5. If let's just say hypothetically you have 6 speakers, that means you would place 2 people in a 5th ranking. First, second, third being like the top. And then also, please do not give any of the students verbal feedback on how they did. You really want to give all your feedback on the ballot. If necessary, anything verbal would have to be something very generic that you can apply to everybody at the end, but individually, the feedback must come from the ballot. And then something I do just want to stress is that finals round have 3 judges, and you have to wait for all 3 judges to arrive before you start any of the presentations. You have to wait for everybody. If anybody has any questions, I'm going to move on to our second to last slide. And yes.
One thing.
Yes.
I want to say that they tie it 5th in terms of ranks. But if it asks you to rank to 6th or 7th, let's say there are 7 people in a round, sometimes that helps. Like I think that it's ranked to 5th, but if it asks you to rank to 6th, then go ahead and rank to 6th, because sometimes that helps with ties, but I want to say it is to 5. And then in terms of the speaker points, I believe that there are guidelines on there, but you generally don't want to go below. In terms of the 1 to 25 speaker points, obviously 25 is best, but you don't really want to go below like 15 or 18 really, because then you end up, the norm is somewhere between like say ideally 18 to 25 or 15 to 25, depending on how you see it, but you don't really want to go much below that unless the speaker was obviously not giving a complete speech, or there was something, you know, like offensive, highly offensive in the round or something. You know, you want to justify that by writing on the ballot, hey, you know, they got up, they gave a 1-minute speech, and then they just couldn't get through the rest of it. So we tried, but they just were very anxious and they couldn't get through the rest of it. And so that is why I gave them, you know, what, X number of points. Just make sure that you're writing that in there so that the coach doesn't look at your, you know, X number of points and go, why did they get such low points? They did not write any comments about that. So make sure that you're explaining things.
Thank you, Colette. So I'm just going to go ahead and move on to our second to last slide really quick. So for the virtual tournament, excuse me, in case students do have any internet disconnection or issues, students have 10 minutes to reconnect to finish a speech. They should not start over. So say for instance, they're at 5 minutes on your phone and on your timer, make sure to pause it and give them about 10 minutes to return. If they don't return, you can provide some feedback on that. That doesn't mean that that played into your decision. It's just you letting them know this is where you finish and this is what I had so far from your speech to provide you feedback on. If they can reconnect within 45 minutes of the start of the round, that is ideal. Remember, you kind of need to, as judges, we need to be there for all the students to present. If you feel like you're closing in on time when the next round is starting, definitely communicate that to us in Tabroom, like, hey, this student is missing. Have you heard anything? Can you contact their head coach? I'm still here waiting for them. Like I mentioned at the very beginning, communication will be key this entire weekend. If they still cannot reconnect, judge them based on the part they did present. So at least they have some idea of feedback that they can use moving forward in the next few days or in future competitions. Students should have a single camera setup. So they should have been able to play around this weekend, like with spacing, what would work best for them. And then definitely use that. There should not be any physical audience members present or who can participate or contribute. So definitely, unfortunately, no friends, no siblings, no parents in the background. It really does have to be them and their virtual setup that is before them, presenting and competing. This does not apply to people who need to walk by or happen to be there, because we understand their virtual space options are very limited. So if someone happens to walk by them, that doesn't mean that that's a participating audience member. That just means someone happened to walk by. And those who need any assistance for disability reasons are also more than welcome to have assistance. This is just more for students who wanted to have like all their friends with them to relieve that sense of nervousness. Unfortunately, we cannot have that. We will, as judges, do our best to make the students feel comfortable, make sure to give encouraging nods and smiles throughout their speeches so they know that you're with them in what they're presenting. And just one last thing before I close off, and then if there's any final questions, I wanted to show you this in terms of resources. If you do need any form of contact or help, this is our helpline. I have the text line here for you, the email, and then for individual event judges and the Tabroom where you'll be meeting, like the spacing where we will all be at in case you have any questions about a platform or you need a handout. That's the link and that's the Zoom room you definitely want to be a part of. But that concludes the presentation that Colette and I have for you. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. also Colette, but thank you all so much for being here. We are all grateful to have you, and I really hope you have a great time and learn something different in regards to speech and debate.
I wanted to mention really quickly that if a student is having an issue with connecting, don't just wait 10 minutes for them to reconnect. Go on to another student. Like, don't try to help them with their tech problems, because you have a round to run and that round needs to keep happening. So if they end up getting disconnected and they can't come back within a couple of minutes, then, you know, at that point, you need to just kind of like pause on that and then, you know, move on to the next speaker and see if they pop back in after that next speaker is done. So after the next speaker is done, see if they were able to reconnect back, because the information about where to get tech help and how to reconnect and how to get all of these things working again is on the main page of the website. So they can always get, you know, their reconnecting done. And as long as they can get that speech in by the end of the round, then they're good. But if the end of the round is here and they still weren't able to reconnect, please do not keep the round going. The round, once the round is over, just please, you know, like move on if they haven't come back by that time. But if it is reasonable for them to finish the speech by the end of the round, you know, or a couple of minutes after, like, that's not really that's okay, but don't wait until the end of the round and then suddenly they pop back in and it's like, oh, now that's a little too late. So usually, like at the collegiate level, they're pretty strict with it. They give them 3 minutes to reconnect, and then you're just kind of out of luck. But here we try to like give a guideline of 10 minutes. But if it's the last speaker, you know, you gotta, as long as they can connect before the end of the round, you can get to everybody, then you're good. And if you have any questions, please feel free to check back with us, and we will be maintaining that communication. Yes, there are more specific judges' instructions, because my goodness, we have 10 events here. And there are more specific judges' instructions for each of the individual events that are on the main page of Tabroom of our tournament. So you'll notice that those popped up there late last night because I put them on there. And each one of them will give you some more detailed information about each event, some guidelines on like some starting to think about some things that you could, you know, think about in terms of giving them feedback on. And some more like detailed instructions, as well as a few of the things that we wanted to reiterate from today's presentation that are really important. So there are more detailed instructions about that. Anyone have any other questions?